shy as they run, who steals me gold, won't live through the night.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. Welcome to Niche Retelling, the podcast where we explore all the ways old tales are made new. I'm your host, Jasmine Garcia, and joining me today are...
Hi, I am CB. Fuck you, Lucky Charm Smith.
And I'm Chandler, Leprechaun 3, Lost in Las Vegas, De Rocher.
And today we are covering the first entry in the Leprechaun series. For those of you who don't know, this is a slasher series starring Warwick Davis as an evil leprechaun.
Greetings! I am IER60, Star Wars Retelling Connections. Point of intersection found. This is a degree 3. Warwick Davis had multiple roles throughout the Star Wars franchise, and Tony Cox played Ewok in Return of the Jedi, Will in The Ewok Adventure, and Willie in Ewoks The Battle for Endor. For additional degrees and uncredited amendments, check out inexplicably.tumblr.com/sibling blogs.
Even though he's more like a bad chiropractor because he snaps a lot of people's necks.
Yeah, he gets better in the sequels.
Oh, that's interesting to know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's every bit as silly as it sounds. But hey, we love Warwick Davis on this podcast. I actually have not talked about him on this podcast much, but I have talked about him a lot on Sam's podcast, particularly about the Willow series, which I will forever mourn.
I haven't had a chance to see it.
Not surprising, and now thanks to Disney's bullshit, you never will.
I got to see him conduct an orchestra once, so that was cool.
Ooh, that is awesome.
It was Harry Potter related because, of course, it was. It was at a celebration of Harry Potter one year. They had.
I had a feeling.
Warwick Davis conduct the orchestra. It was really cool.
Turf Wizard.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Not that I'm holding it against Warwick Davis. That's not his fault. But anyway. With that said, obviously, the Leprechaun is basically the mascot of St. Patrick's Day, I think it's fair to say. And of course has roots in Irish folklore. So we gotta ask, what is everyone's connection to Irish folklore?
Well, I got a whole bunch of European heritage. I'm like Scottish, Irish, French, anything else really from that side. So I'm a whole bunch of different variations of white. So that's kind of, I don't really have, I mean, my grandmother on my mom's side, her last name is McCollum. So there's that connection there. But I don't really have tons of, I don't really have any like deeply rooted traditions or anything like that come from that side. It's just kind of something I've been aware of. That's there.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. It seems like, a lot of people from Ireland that came here, basically in order to assimilate, you kind of have to let that sort of thing go. And it leaves a lot of the descendants, unfortunately, missing out on that, I feel like.
Yeah, well, actually, another thing is Molly McGee, my favorite character, she is half Thai and half Irish. And that, of course, is based on Ashley Birch, who is half Thai and half Irish. But apart from like one song in the show, they never really do anything with the Irish side of her heritage. They focus a lot on the Thai side of her. There's, of course, the fabulous episode 100% Molly McGee, where she feels like she's not Thai enough for her own family. But yeah, like the closest we ever really got to anything was like an Irish inspired song in an episode that was focused more on her dad.
Aww.
So part of me wonders if they'd gotten another season, maybe they would have done a family reunion episode on that side, because it seems like her dad's relationship with his family is more strained. So that would have been interesting, but they never got into that. So
that could have been. And as a very white passing, half Dominican, half German person, boy, not feeling like enough of your heritage is a mood.
Yeah, that episode resonated so strongly with so many people. And we can see as we're recording this, you can see Molly's right behind me on my set. There she is. Yep. She's hanging out.
Yep, she pops up in all your photos, which I think is adorable.
Yeah, I love taking her around and taking pictures with her.
My connection to Irish folklore and Ireland heritage is my green cardigan that I'm wearing and this bottle of Guinness that I am drinking with you guys. And that's about the extent of it. So now my friends are very Irish. I got one buddy who's from Ireland. So, I'm going to make fun of his accent for a bit there. And just by proxy, just my connection with Ireland is by proxy and this movie series. That's all I got.
That's very fair. Especially since, kind of the same here. Irish folklore isn't really an area of mythology that I've ever really gotten that into. I mean, dear friend of the show, Connor, is in fact from Ireland, so there's that. We have that in common, Smith, I guess. But I did take it upon myself to do a little more research on specifically leprechauns and kind of their origins in Irish mythology, and a couple things I found
Perfect.
out. Much later addition to Celtic and Irish mythology, for one thing. And it seems like there's a number of ideas of where the roots are. Most seem to be coming from the late medieval period. So basically, according to a lot of scholars, the word leprechaun comes from the Irish Celtic god and cultural hero Luch, which literally means luck, apparently, and was originally the god of the sun and the light. And there are a couple of other ideas there, like there's the idea that it comes from the idea of water sprites. But the one possible root of the myth of the leprechaun that I found particularly relevant to this movie we're talking about is the therein. And to quote worldhistory.org, they are ugly little fairies with a wrinkled old face.
It checks out.
Very fond of practical jokes, but some of these can be lethal, and hence he might be considered an evil leprechaun.
Yeah.
And the one good trait of a therein is that he can, if he so wishes, release people who become trapped in fairyland.
That never comes up in this franchise.
I had a funny feeling, no. And no mention of rapping, of course.
What about
Me zombie fly girls! What is happening? Why are we doing this? No!
He's the Lep in the Hood, and he's up to no good.
Lep in the Hood come to do no good.
I'm sure we'll address that eventually.
Oh my goodness. Is there any mention about polishing shoes by any chance?
Oh yes, like there's also the, let's see if I can pronounce this properly, there's the Clodachan. So these are spirits that are known to haunt cellars. They sometimes carry a purse full of coins. There's mention of them often being cobblers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They're just walking around being like, it's clobbering time.
Oh god. It's cobblering time, if anything.
Cobblering time. You make shoes.
Oh, I messed up my own pun. Dang it.
It's okay. It's still very, very funny.
Well, it's the Guinness that's in me.
Yeah, so like there is a little bit of kind of everything that's possibly in that. But yeah, they're often known as fairy craftsmen. They're often known as being very mischievous.
So basically, we're taking a whole bunch of different legends and just throwing them together in a blender and making a shamrock shake.
Kind of, yeah, which I mean, that's kind of what happens with a lot of folklore and mythology, I find.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't want to go on a big tangent, but with vampirism, like a lot of the things that Bram Stoker grabbed were from werewolves originally.
That is true. That is very true.
Yeah. One, when you go to Epcot around the holidays, they have the Festival of the Holidays. They have the holiday storytellers. And a lot of the, you go around and you see all the different traditions of the different variations of Santa Claus. Kind of a similar thing where it's like a lot of different elements come together to form kind of the general idea of what Santa Claus is today.
100%. But yeah, so basically they took all of that, and after the medieval period, leprechauns became very popular with a lot of writers and even started popping up in Hollywood films like Finian's Rainbow. And I guess we should definitely count Darby O'Gill. And of course, this whole thing.
Oh boy.
Oh, Chandler is channeling his inner Davis laugh right there.
Yeah, so this is a film franchise that has managed to get 8 entries. As far as things that star Warwick Davis and don't just have him as ever-present side characters, this is his most successful franchise.
His magnum opus.
Even though the second one tanked so hard that the rest of them ended up being direct-to-video, they still kept making them. I don't really know why, but they did.
They kept making money, Chandler. They kept making money.
Yeah, because that's the thing.
I guess.
Yeah, because chances are they were very cheap to make, because most horror movies are.
Oh, yeah. Especially, by the time you get to, Leprechaun in the Hood. It's like they're filming on like random sets that they happen to have.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy.
And going back to connections to typical leprechaun mythos, they are often associated with shoemaking and, of course, the pot of gold. And it seems generally in these stories, the way that a human can get the pot of gold is if they basically demand it while keeping their eyes on the leprechaun. But of course, they are very good at being sneaky and escaping. So
That is how we get our pot of gold in this film, is that he doesn't trap it. Or is it Mr. O'Grady?
yep, Daniel O'Grady. And what's funny is that his wife calls him both Mr. O'Grady and Daniel O'Grady within like the first few seconds of her screen time, which is just plain weird in my eyes. Which, yeah, so what is everyone's connection to this unlikely juggernaut of a franchise? And Smith, you were the one to suggest this, so why don't you go first?
Oh yes, I did. I know you guys threw Sam, and Sam. I sometimes I like being a little scamp. Not that much different than Warwick Davis in these films. I grew up on the Sci-Fi Channel. I was a big Sci-Fi Channel kid, and they still to this day do marathons of this film series. So I would always watch it there, and then my local Hollywood Video, Blockbuster, just to age myself, they always had copies of the series. So I just grabbed what I can during St. Patrick's Day and just had my own little marathon. So I grew up with the series. I haven't seen all of them. The last two that have come out, I have not, but I do have fond memories watching the series, even like the worst of the worst. I'm much more connected to these films than I am to anything Irish and Irish heritage.
Chandler, how about you?
So I primarily know about these films because of the kill count on Dead Meat on YouTube. The Leprechaun was one that James covered pretty early in the life of the kill count series. I think it was still like the first year he was doing the kill count. Okay. So coming off of like doing Friday the 13th, he did Leprechaun fairly early on. And so it was kind of back when the kill count was more of a different show. It was much less about like the behind the scenes and movie making and more just kind of making little quips about the movies. But I think even then he still mentioned like Gabe Bartalos is the real hero of these movies because he's the one who did all the makeup design for the Leprechaun and all the practical effects that you see that actually look good, because all the other visual effects for the most part don't look good. So it really is like you got Gabe Bartalos and Warwick Davis who made this franchise what it is. It's an interesting franchise because it's like most of it is just kind of not very good, but then there's elements in it that are like, okay, this is actually kind of fun even though it's really bad. So it's one of those.
Yeah, I had heard of it as well. I think I first heard of it when I was reading Seth Grahame-Smith's book, How to Survive a Horror Movie, because it was listed as one of the recommendations of movies to watch to quote-unquote study how to survive a horror movie. And unfortunately, the channel we don't talk about anymore also helped introduce me to its concept, and I'm just like,
oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
The less we talk about that, the better.
It's all good. I don't even remember what we're talking about.
Talk about Walker. No.
I really do enjoy this movie series. My feeling about it is it started out with this trend that was going on, I think because of Gremlins, where I don't really know how to name it other than like take established folklore, fairy tale, child whimsical thing and make horror out of it. Now we're seeing that trend right now with Winnie the Pooh and Mickey Mouse because it's public domain. Look, I'm just mentioning it.
No, I know.
And if you want a good example, Krampus.
Yes.
Krampus too is another one.
Of course, Krampus was already an existing creature in folklore, and that's a subject for another podcast, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
It'll definitely be an episode someday, I'm sure.
But in the 1990s, you had like Rumpelstiltskin. You had one called Pinocchio's Revenge. That one's interesting because it's more like a psychological thriller about like childhood abandonment.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay, you have my intrigue.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I told you guys like we should do Leprechaun. Any weird, obscure horror thing, I'm your guy.
Yay.
And it is fairly obscure as horror movies go, and yet obviously it's still got like 8 films. And I think part of that is just because Warwick Davis as the Leprechaun, it's kind of very much a wannabe like Freddy Krueger or or
100%.
Chucky, where they're really trying to make him a horror icon that spits out one-liners constantly, but they don't really have the means to actually make that work, because half the kills, at least in the first couple films, aren't memorable. Some of them are really cool. Like they get better, they get weirder, but a lot of the time it's like he's just breaking people's necks or biting on them.
Yes, we'll probably talk about it further on, but like how they frame this first movie, like there's a lot of issues with the fact that like the setting does clash a lot with what the monster is.
Yeah.
And how they fight back with it. It gets a lot better in the sequels, but like, this first iteration.
It's also just very funny because this movie so obviously feels like it was meant to be more of a PG-13 kids movie, like the Goonies. And then, and I know this is exactly what happened. And then the studio decided, wait, why don't we make this more of an R-rated horror movie? And so they just added some extra gore, but like the tone kind of feels like all over the place as a result.
Oh, that explains a lot.
This feels like a kid's movie, but yet it also has like a little bit of nasty gore and also several F-bombs.
Yeah, my only source is IMDb, so take with it with a grain of salt, but there's a lot of back and forth. There's different producers, actors, writers kept saying like, no, we need to make this like a gritty horror movie. And other people are like, no, it's got to be a little bit like, it'll be dark, but it'll be more whimsical, like again, like Gremlins. And so like what you have, especially in this first film, is a hodgepodge of like, oh, we're going to rip a guy's eye out, but we're also going to have Warwick Davis roller skate into a fence and it'd be the outline of his body, like a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Right, I was about to say,
it's so cartoony. Take a shot every time Lep is using a different mode of transportation. You will be dead. Well, how many wheeled objects and a pogo stick for good measure can we put Lep on?
Yeah, apparently he's canonically named Lubden. But that never pops up in the films, from my understanding.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the Lubden connection, you'll learn in the Leprechaun comic book series that came out. So I haven't read them, but like I've been trying to get my hands on a copy, and they're kind of like, it was like a one and done deal.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's still better than Leprechaun 4 in space, where they literally never say the word leprechaun in the entire script, because it was so obviously an Aliens ripoff script that was just spray painted to be a Leprechaun movie.
Oh, boy.
They literally don't say that he's a leprechaun in that movie. He's just an alien.
How far in the future is it? Is it possible that they don't know what a leprechaun is anymore?
I mean, that's entirely possible.
It doesn't matter because it's just bad. It's not Jason X where it's like entertainingly bad, like where it's like they knew they were making something campy. I mean, I think they always knew that these movies were campy, but like, oh god, Leprechaun 4 is just so not good.
I would argue Leprechaun 4 is the litmus test of if you're down for Leprechaun and you're okay with Leprechaun 4, then you're okay with the rest of the series.
Except for maybe the Leprechaun origin bullshit.
We don't talk about that.
That was bad for completely different reasons. That feels like an entirely different movie. Although the one good thing about that is that it actually did have a budget, so it's like you watch that, it's like, oh my god, there's production value in this. That's like unheard of. So
I'd like to start going on with the first movie, but I will say with Origins, that one was a big kerfuffle because that was a joint production with WWE, and that movie was supposed to be...
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it was supposed to be like the film like debut of Hornswoggle.
Yeah.
I'm not a big wrestling guy, so I don't know.
So well. That went so well. That definitely worked out for them. That wasn't an absolute tire fire.
Hornswoggle is as successful as like the likes of Dave Bautista and The Rock, of course.
I can't even think of another movie he was in.
I don't know wrestling. I'm out of my league here.
Neither do I, but I do know Dave Bautista and The Rock. Just about everybody does.
All right, who else is famous in this first Leprechaun movie?
Jennifer Aniston.
You have Jennifer Aniston. You know what's really funny is when I was sitting down to watch this movie on Peacock, I got an ad for Skinny Pop. The first thing, and it's like, it's Jennifer Aniston. I'm like, oh my god, you got to be kidding me! That feels like fate. That's so funny. And literally the joke of the commercial is that the front desk clerk like has no idea who she is and just wants the popcorn, which that's funny.
There's a lot of back and forth on whether or not Jennifer Aniston like tries to deny her existence in this film, being like, oh no, I wasn't in it. What?
Kevin Bacon was like that with Friday the 13th for a while, and then
that's a shame.
Yeah, it seems like because he never pops up in like interviews or anything like that, but they did reference that he was in Friday the 13th in the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special.
They did.
What about when you fought and defeated the super strong masked killer Jason Voorhees in the woods?
Yeah.
Nope. Again, not me, just a character I played. And he didn't actually kill Jason. He got stabbed through the neck with an arrow.
So that is referenced there. But yeah, Kevin Bacon hasn't done much with Friday the 13th outside of that.
Yeah, and Jennifer Aniston has never come back for Leprechaun, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, they got a sound alike in the most recent one, which was actually pretty good. Because the most recent one kind of followed the requel trend, where like it's a direct sequel to the first one. So they actually brought Ozzy back, which was really nice to see him again. And it's not Warwick Davis this time, but it's still like it's meant to be the same character, and they actually kind of follow the same rules, which we'll get to that as well, I'm sure, because the rules are constantly changing in this franchise. What the actual deal is with the Leprechaun character.
So that's the other thing, is that they're all different leprechauns, but they're all named Lubden.
Is that canon? Is that true?
So it's like all the different timelines in Halloween, but somehow worse?
I believe so, according to this mythical comic that I haven't got my hands on yet. But yes, every leprechaun is a different leprechaun in every movie. That's why the rules don't apply.
So Leprechaun is like Ryan George? Is that what you're telling me?
What?
It's super easy, barely an inconvenience.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's all the same face. He always has the same face. That's so funny. I love that, honestly.
I mean, that's the best way to get around and be like, oh, they're all different leprechauns. You know, go with it, whatever.
They're all different leprechauns. Just go with it.
It's the Lepreverse.
Who cares? Yes.
Not the
Leprechauns
Lepreverse.
in the Lepreverse. Oh my god. And
don't give him ideas, I guess.
Hornswoggle's leprechaun is just in the corner, like we don't talk about him. No, he doesn't even go here.
Yeah, so basically, again, it's like Halloween, but worse somehow.
Halloween has a timeline at some point, like it all diverges at somewhere.
Yeah,
but other than
you can make a chart out of it at least.
You can't make a chart with Leprechaun.
Michael Myers, for the most part, doesn't have superpowers, whereas, like, you compare that even to, like, Jason, seems to gain the ability to teleport later on, but, like, he was just a dude. And then you got Freddy, who, like, those rules are mostly kept consistent until you get to, like, Freddy's dead, when, like, everything just gets... all the logic just gets thrown out the window. Like, nothing
Which
matters.
is so ironic.
Kind of get to Freddy's dead.
Because you would think you could get away with being a little less consistent, considering his whole thing is dreams. Dreams are never consistent.
Well, right. But the way that, for example, you die in the dream, you die in real life, that was consistent. But then, like, all of a sudden, you know, people just start, you know, disappearing and being able to, like, enter dreams in different ways. And it's very weird. It kind of... The whole series kind of collapses under its own weight, which I guess maybe is something that Leprechaun doesn't really have to deal with, because they don't fucking care. They change the rules every movie.
The one consistent rule with Leprechaun is you don't steal his gold. That's it.
You don't steal his gold.
You don't steal his gold, you're good to go.
Yep, fair enough.
But the funny thing is, kids that we follow in this movie, at first they didn't really steal his gold. He kind of just was in that house.
I mean, I guess you could argue Faye logic with that one.
I guess we should get to the plot at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, so I went in just like, okay, you know what? We're going to have a silly, goofy time here.
Is this your first time watching this?
This is my first time. I am very happy that you're excited. I will admit, unfortunately, I did not have as silly and goofy a time as I wanted.
It's all right. We'll change that mind throughout the rest of this show.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's like, you know what? It starts off pretty strong. It's just like, oh, so we're getting right into the dark fairy tale tone. I feel like I'm watching that one Rumpelstiltskin movie with Amy Irving that I watched all the time when I was a little kid again. Like, he's literally just coming out in that silly little outfit, counting his gold. It's just like, okay, let's go.
And then even in the beginning, when he's confronting with the O'Grady's, they keep him in the shadows. Like, they do a really good job, because like we talked about the makeup, and the makeup is fantastic, like throughout the whole series, honestly. But they really hold it back in the beginning of this film. Not much for the rest of the series, but this time, like there's a really nice haunting whimsy to it in the beginning. That's why it kind of feels like to me like that whole like kid but darker feel to it.
They do a lot with the voiceovers and like Lep's ability to change his voice. I wrote in my notes, Dewey, he's got our voices, because he does like the perfectly imitating voice changer thing.
Ghostface versus Leprechaun, let's go.
There actually was an attempt to have him cross over with another horror franchise that was a little bit more obscure, Wishmaster, which is
Oh, that would have been really good.
They would have just been wisecracking with each other. It would have been great.
That would have been interesting. I only vaguely
Honestly,
know which
Wishmaster slaps. That would have been fun.
So further along with the plot of the first one, right? O'Grady, he's an older Irish guy. He comes in with a limousine, and and his wife is like, Daniel O'Grady, you're drunk.
We can't afford this.
Yep.
We can't afford this and everything. He's like, oh, no, I got me mother's ashes right here, and smashes the vase, and out comes the gold.
That poor woman, honestly. She must put up with
She
so
didn't
much
do
shit.
anything wrong. She just made him a pot of tea and she got killed.
Yeah.
Just the way she just stumbled back like that is just like I feel like when you're doing a horror movie, your first death should really be a punch in the gut. And that was just like, I feel like you could have held yourself a little steadier than that, ma'am.
That was a chiropractic adjustment. You'll see multiple of these.
Well, because she fell down the stairs and that's how she died. He didn't even really kill her.
Right.
I mean, it's right. He just wants his pot of gold at this point.
Yeah, he's not really feeling all that sadistic at this time.
He also pretends to be a ventriloquist with her corpse, but he's not very good at ventriloquism.
No, he's not. The mouth doesn't even move. What a ripoff.
Don't quit your day job.
And then apparently off cold open where Daniel O'Grady basically manages to trap Lep in a crate and puts a clover on top, and so he can't escape because the clover prevents him from escaping. But then he's about to light everything up. He douses it in gasoline and is about to light everything on fire. But then the leprechaun makes him have a stroke?
He keeps telling him, don't strain yourself, so I guess so?
I'm not sure how that works. I don't know exactly what the logistics of that are. Later, he does other things that are, like later in the franchise, he does other things that are, his magic is so nebulous the whole time. That's the thing. But
Chandler, that's your first mistake. You try and do logistics in the Leprechaun movies.
I know there is none. But basically, for the sake of this movie, Daniel O'Grady, I assume, is eventually found in his basement and taken to the retirement home he ends up in. And then that house sits there abandoned for like 10 years. And they don't really mention that up front. So it kind of just cuts to Tori and her father driving to this house.
I mean, come on. Here I am in New Mexico with my hick father for the whole summer.
Hey.
No offense.
First of all, it's not New Mexico. It's North Dakota.
Like it matters. All I care about is not L.A.
Like, no, that's not even remotely the same.
Nope. Yeah, and they just really hammered in what a spoiled brat she is, and
they make her so unlikable at the beginning.
Yeah,
they don't really do a whole lot,
and not even in a remotely well-written way,
So I agree with that, but I also kind of disagree because I do think it's a little unfair that you're taking someone who they don't want to spend their summertime fixing up a house, and what do? You take them that is unfair. But yeah, her attitude and everything is meant to be oh, what a spoiled sport and everything. But at the same time, I grew up, my dad had me at 8 years old, taking apart air conditioners. Not my idea of a good time on the weekends.
No, for sure. But it's just I would never have gotten away with speaking to my father like that. And
no.
He needed to be meaner. And then I probably would have felt a little worse for her.
He also kind of disappears from the movie after the little incident we'll get to that kind of takes them away from the house for a bit.
And you make a good point, Chandler. They don't even mention, hey, some people, a woman died mysteriously here.
In this house.
Yeah, that's horror movie 101. You need that. Something terrible happened in this house.
Yeah, everyone's just oh, it's the O'Grady place.
Yeah, they do make a reference of oh yeah, that O'Grady, he was a weird guy.
But
and that was the extent of it. Yeah, that was the extent of it.
What a wasted opportunity for a good harbinger of impending doom.
Yeah.
Yeah, this setting was like the biggest like weak point for this movie.
You could tell that they picked the setting because it was the location that they had to work with.
Yeah.
And then they wrote the movie around that. It's one of those for sure.
The mountains of California, I mean North Dakota.
Yeah.
Yeah, they never explain like what is Dad's deal with the house. Obviously he did like is he selling it, renovating it or whatever. And it just kind of is like, Dad, what are you doing here?
Yeah. We never get an answer to that.
Yeah, why is he so attached to this place?
And we meet the mullet known as Nathan.
Kevin Nokin.
Wearing that, that shirt that shows off all his biceps. So obviously Tori's like, oh, okay, all right, he's hot. I want to stay here. Maybe now. Probably not.
Wait, no,
Well, she's really rude to him at first.
Yeah, she's rude to him, and then he does what every 90s boy love interest does, is a little casual sexism.
Well, I just think it's funny the way girls are always afraid of spiders and stuff,
Whoa. Okay, wait a minute. Did I misplace my 1950s calendar here? Girls? Listen, bud. Hey, this is the 90s. Women are treated equal.
And it's just like, oh my God.
Drag yourself into the 90s.
Yeah, please don't try to make this belligerent sexual tension. There's no chemistry here. And they don't even really follow through with it is the worst part. Like, if you're going to force us to endure it, at least make it happen. It's Twisters all over again.
They're kind of forced together by the situation, and they don't really do anything afterward. Like the biggest thing we get is like halfway through the movie when they're at the diner. He's like, "Come on, you need to eat. Here, have some meatloaf." She's like, "I want an Evian water and a salad." They don't serve salad at these diners.
For me, I need my horror movie to make me care at least a little bit about the characters. Or they are going to lose me, unfortunately.
Well, that's why we have Ozzy.
There's only one person I care about, and that's the Leprechaun.
Well, yeah, the Leprechaun. But that's also why we have Ozzy and, what's the other kid's name? Alex?
Yeah, what's the name of the company they all work for?
Three Guys That Paint.
Three Guys That Paint. They certainly are three guys, and they definitely do paint.
Well, they're more like 2.5 men, but, Well, how old is Ozzy, actually? How old is he supposed to be?
He's definitely an adult, and
yeah, he's an adult, but it's like how old is he? He's like, I don't feel like he's that much older than 18. I don't know. It doesn't really matter.
He's certainly coded as something.
He has that. God, I had a reference here. It was a Leonardo DiCaprio, What's Eating Gilbert Grape. Ben Stiller, Simply Jack type of 90s, not specific mental challenge or
disability.
Yeah. I think he's autistic.
Oh.
As someone who is autistic, I think he's autistic. And honestly, as autism representation goes, I love Ozzy. I think he's a really sweet guy.
He is a nice guy.
He's the closest to a likable character we got. Yeah.
Yeah, and everyone's like really sweet to him, also, even the cops.
Yeah. Also, I love
everyone's
his
really
shirt.
sweet to him.
They don't hate him, and they're like, oh, he's a good kid.
He's just like that.
Yeah.
I love his paintbrush shirt that he wears.
Alex is a little snot, though.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Alex is like that movie kid that like...
He's a mini adult, basically.
Yeah, he's a mini adult. It's very Goonies-esque.
And in fairness, I guess they were really trying to do like a contrast between him and Ozzy. It's just like, oh, isn't it funny how this adult is acting like a kid and this kid is acting like an adult? And it's just like, I guess.
Yeah. Besides the Leprechaun, they're the most compelling characters in the movie.
I mean, they're the only ones that actually get like kind of anything in terms of like character.
Yeah.
Because they do the inciting incident where Ozzy, he lets the Leprechaun out. No one believes him. But then they find the pot of gold, him and Alex. And
he ends up swallowing one of the gold coins, which like, how did you do that?
How
did you do that? I know the answer why from a writing perspective. It's because we have to have a reason why they can't just give the Leprechaun back the gold. And so it's like, oh, well, one of them is he swallows one of them. And I mean, obviously they want to do the selfish thing at first and, cash in on it. Alex says the whole thing. It's like, oh, we can get you an operation to make you smart. And it's like, oh boy, this could potentially be problematic.
Flowers for Algernon plan at best.
But then later, Tori's like, there's not actually an operation. He's like, no, I know that. But he doesn't know that. I'm like, well, that's kind of nice, but also kind of messed up.
It's very messed up.
Yeah.
I guess you can chalk it up to, again, Alex is still a child, even though he doesn't act like it most of the time. Like, what is the relation between these two? Are they brothers, or what's going on there?
Alex and Nathan are the brothers.
Are the three of them brothers? Is Alex
No,
related to the other two, or
Nathan, the love interest, is related to Alex. They're brothers. They're the
that's
two
right.
guys.
Okay, yes. And then Ozzy's
and
just their friend.
I think Ozzy is like someone that like Nathan can hire. Like painting houses is not the most complicated job, so he's like, well, I can give Ozzy a decent wage. I can get him to work. He's a good worker.
Yeah.
He's dedicated. He's a good guy. So I think that's more like the dichotomy. And because Ozzy is coded to be kind of like childlike, Alex really gets into that too. They talk about comic books a lot of times.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely their dichotomy. Outside of them being three guys that also paint.
Right.
God.
Which, like, that house is not ready to be painted.
No.
It's got junk everywhere.
It was like, there's so much you got to do first.
You got tarantulas and...
Yeah, like, on the one hand, I can't blame her for not wanting to be there. It's like they did everything in their power to make you not feel bad for her. It's just like, I'm onto you, writers. I'm onto you and your sexist bullshit. I see what you're trying to do here.
No, if I told my wife that, like, oh, baby, we're going to go fix up this cabin. We're going to live in the cabin. And the first thing she sees is big tarantulas and cobwebs galore everywhere. It's like, no, you go to a hotel. I got this. Don't worry.
But yeah, the leprechaun has been let loose and is clearly very bitter from his years of imprisonment, which, fair, I guess.
Yeah, honestly.
And just immediately chooses violence everywhere he goes.
Yeah.
But he does shine shoes.
Violence.
Yes.
Immediately wants to
get his gold.
Immediately wants to shine Ozzy's shoes. Even though at that point they don't have any idea where the gold is. It's only after the leprechaun's already let loose that they then follow the rainbow to find the pot of gold. And it's funny because you'd think the leprechaun would be able to find his gold pretty easily because apparently the rainbow was summoned by, or was caused by him being let out, and yet the kids get it first and end up being able to take it into town later. But in between that, he kind of just messes with them, but remains unseen, even though he has no reason to remain unseen other than just making it so that Ozzy tries to tell everyone about a leprechaun, and everyone's like, "Oh, Ozzy, you're so silly."
There is a throwaway line that he's like, "I don't have all of me power because I don't have me gold,"
and
also
of course, trickster vibes.
Yeah, exactly. He's a little scamp. He's a little guy. He's just a little guy.
He's like, yeah, I'm just gonna cause chaos, choose violence, shine shoes,
death by pogo stick.
Death by pogo stick. Well, first he, because to kind of get us away from the house, he ends up biting the dad's hand, and it looks like his hand gets covered in some strawberry jelly. The gore effects are not great.
Hey, being in a crate for 10 years, he'd be hungry.
Yeah.
This is going back to the whole, like, they added this in afterwards when they were like, no, let's make this an R-rated thing. So, like, there's some really nice gore, like, scenes with, like, an eyeball and, like, the tail end of the movie. And then you got, like, this strawberry jam in the hand. So that's how Dad gets out of the picture, which is, like, I forget he's there every time I rewatch this.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, Dad's here.
He just needed to be there because
to get Tori there.
Needed to be there. And so they go to the hospital, and then everyone else plans to go to the diner, but of course Ozzy and Alex go to a pawn shop first, which will be the first of many in the series. And what does the leprechaun do? He's like, hey, there's a tricycle in this shed. I'm going to take this tricycle. And that's the first of many vehicles we will see him in this movie.
Grand Theft Tricycle, it's so silly.
There's more vehicles than there are kills in this horror movie. There's more different vehicles that Leprechaun rides than the amount of people he actually kills.
It's true.
I mean, he's been trapped in that crate for 10 years, so he's got a little atrophy in his legs. He needs vehicles.
Yeah,
the tricycle was just, it was leg day.
Fair enough.
You don't skip leg day.
And speaking of the pogo stick kill, the whole idea of a pogo stick kill is super fun because the pawn shop owner ends up getting killed by the leprechaun because he hangs on to one of the gold coins to study it. And you kind of feel bad for the pawn shop owner because it's like, he didn't know anything about this. He didn't take the gold. He just was given it to look at.
He was just here. He was just doing his job.
Yeah, he was just here. But the leprechaun pogos on his chest, which means, of course, his face gets all bloodied for no reason. And like just you cut it back and forth between the pogo stick and his face and this fake body, and it's like none of this feels real. Like you don't feel like any of this is actually happening ever.
Yeah.
Not even for a second.
I mean, they did a decent enough job, like cutting between Warwick Davis hopping on a pogo stick with a shot of the shopkeep, like, you know, getting impacted, and you see the different blood effects on his face, and you hear the sound effects of the pogo stick hitting him, bones crunching stuff. So it's not the worst kill.
If anything, I think it's the best one.
Oh yeah, it's the most fun kill in the movie, but it's like,
yes,
that means that the other ones are just not good at all.
Yes, I'll explain a little bit later on like, my issue with this first movie in terms of like what the Leprechaun does.
I think part of the problem is the pacing is just so slow. It moves at a glacial pace. It's like, why is this taking so long? There's no reason for this to take so long. I think it's because the first one, they're kind of like, okay, we want this to be like still like an actual movie, and then in the other ones they just give up and are like, this exists for fun kills, and that's all that we really have.
I respectfully disagree with you, sir, but we will get to that later.
Okay. To be fair, I haven't actually sat down and watched the other movies all the way through. So I don't really have that experience to go off of. And it's like, there's no reason for it to move this slow.
That is a weak point in the movie. So they get back to the farmhouse, and it essentially becomes like a siege movie where the people are trapped in the farmhouse, and there's a threat preventing them from leaving.
And everyone but Ozzy thinks it's a fucking bear.
Is it a bear? Well, did a bear sign my shoes?
Before we get back to the farmhouse, we have to talk about the police officer. So in the pawn shop, there's the Power Wheels whatever that the Leprechaun takes, and he's driving, and he gets pulled over, and the police officer thinks it's a kid in a mask. Apparently, he thinks that this is Tommy Jarvis, because that's the only explanation as to why a kid would have that good of a mask. But anyways, we end up having this whole chase sequence that was added when they were trying to make it more of a horror movie, and it's just the most drawn out chase sequence you've ever seen. And it's not good. It's not a good chase sequence.
Look, it's drawn out. I'll give you that one. But there's a moment where like he's like popping in between trees. He's like, "Here I am, try to catch me!"
Yeah, that was fun, and that played on the fact that he's magic. But everything where the police officer is just running through the forest.
It's like, I wrote down in my notes, it's just like, everyone who has been killed by this leprechaun ought to be ashamed of themselves.
How did you let him do this?
He's just a little guy.
I mean, it's the same thing with Chucky, but at least Chucky has the element of surprise of being able to disguise himself as a doll.
Yep, it's just like, this is a weird dude with sharp teeth who means you harm.
He's really
kick him
weak.
In the face.
You could kick him. And they do kick his ass. They do kick his ass later.
They do.
He gets his ass kicked so much.
But he goes back to the farmhouse, and this is where they do that kid movie shenanigans where the leprechaun's just going through the house causing mischief, shining all the shoes, eating Lucky Clover cereal, not Lucky Charms.
We have to talk about the cereal. Okay, we have to talk about the cereal because I noticed this, and Jasmine, you had additional context for this. So, notice watching this, because I remember that they weren't able to use Lucky Charms, because they referenced Lucky Charms earlier in the movie and later in the movie's most famous line. But they have the fake Lucky Charms. But I noticed when I was watching, I'm like, wait a damn second, but there is Rice Krispies and Raisin Bran, which are both Kellogg's cereals. Lucky Charms is a General Mills cereal. I know this very well because my AP Human Geography teacher, Mr. Kurlanchek, in my freshman year of high school, he worked at General Mills for a very long time. And he was the inventor, he was the creator of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. He had the idea for Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Oh, damn.
And one of the other things he did at General Mills was he also figured out how they could add a different shape of marshmallow to Lucky Charms without messing up the ratio, because they couldn't go over a certain percentage of the boxes being marshmallows before it would be marked as candy.
That's interesting.
They had to keep it under a certain percentage of marshmallows.
That is cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
We are learning so much today.
This was like This was like the coolest person ever. Like, seriously, he was super eccentric. He was really fun. He always had this one of those little animatronic hamster things that he had to do a little dance right before we were getting ready to take a test. He was a really sweet guy. He passed away in my senior year of high school. He taught my freshman and sophomore year, and then junior year he went somewhere else. I think in my senior year was when he passed away. So he was actually fairly young. He was only 60 when he passed away, but he made a huge impact. I mean, he told us so much about just his life, like all these different stories from his life. I posted about him on one of the videos that Andrew Ray Babish did, where he ranked a bunch of different cereals, and he was like, I hope the person who came up with the Cinnamon Toast Crunch is driving their yacht to their bigger yacht. And I kind of told the whole story of him. And a lot of people were like, oh, this is fake. This is so fake. I'm like, what would I gain from lying about this? What would he gain from lying about this? You know?
People are so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's my connection with General Mills. But so I just think it's really funny that, so you were telling me that General Mills they agreed to have the cereal be featured in the movie, but then they saw the movie and were like, absolutely not.
From what I can tell, yes. Which, now that I know that apparently they were initially going to make it a little more kid-friendly, it makes a lot more sense now. But the fact that General Mills ended up pulling back is the reason Fuck You Lucky Charms exists. Because I guess they were real bitter about it.
I heard that, and then I heard different sources. Like I said, I got mine from IMDb, so grain of salt. I believe you. There is another story floating around, and I unfortunately did not have enough time to look into it. So
it's possible this is all apocryphal, I should say, but that is the story I heard.
We're deep diving into the Leprechaun lore here.
Yep.
Yes.
Dear listeners, you are learning so much today.
So what's the story you heard?
The Fuck You Lucky Charms was just like a throwaway gag.
Oh.
That was the one that I like. Again, I haven't looked too much into it. My source is unreliable. Yeah.
Yep, that's IMDb for you.
Release the Lucky Charms cut.
But the shenanigans of Warwick Davis around the house is a fun thing that kind of reminds me of E.T. when he was rummaging around the house. Yeah. Just, a demented leprechaun instead.
Yep. Yeah. Listen, again, I love Warwick Davis. I'm always happy to see him doing things. And if nothing else, he is clearly having a blast with this role. And for that, I am grateful. Warwick Davis deserves the world.
He is a tree, and he's the only reason this film series lasted the way it did.
Oh,
yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So they come back to the house, and they see...
shines all the shoes.
Yes.
And they're like, maybe a bear did this.
Sure. A very talented bear, and his name is Paddington.
Aww.
That'd be a horrible crossover.
Would it be, though? I don't know. Back to the Leprechaun.
Another really weird crossover.
The first movie here, my main issue, and it's kind of an overall thorough thing with the whole film, is that once the Leprechaun attacks everyone, so they're all acknowledging, okay, Leprechaun's real, he's attacking us, he's trying to kill us, trying to get his gold, it becomes a siege movie. And this is where you can kind of change the Leprechaun to any kind of monster, and it would essentially be the same movie. It could be a pack of wolves or a chupacabra or something. There's not a lot of leprechaun-y things happening in this movie.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true.
Exactly.
I mean, I think the biggest thing is the four-leaf clover being his weakness.
Yeah, that's about it. There's a scene where someone gets caught in a bear trap and he's trying to bite him. It's what? And everyone's struggling to the Leprechaun's 2 feet tall, 3 feet tall. And it's you have 4 people able to just kind of wail on him, and you're not doing it.
The kid could beat him up.
They have a shotgun too in the scene.
And of course, in my notes, I had to write, but your leg, it's caught in a bear trap.
The closest thing we get is, I liked the whole idea of, okay, let's go to the senior home to find O'Grady and see what he knows. That scene was really the closest we got to something that felt really effective to me, because...
You know what else? Mm-hmm. That scene actually had some really interesting camera work. They did some Dutch angles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is this doing here?
Like, it felt like a Goosebumps episode.
Oh my God, yeah.
You're showing up a little late with some actual cinematography here. Like, where did this come from?
And Jennifer Aniston actually acting in a really effective way. Like, she looks genuinely horrified. It's just like, okay, okay. And, you know, watching Daniel O'Grady die, that's like genuinely effective. And I'm like,
where was this in the whole movie?
But how did he get thrown through the elevator? Like, where did that come from?
Leprechaun was a little scamp and was like, "Ooh, we're gonna do a little jump scare."
A leprechaun did it.
The leprechaun did it. I also wrote in my notes when they have the shotgun, they're shooting at the leprechaun. I shot him in the heart. I shot him 6 times.
This guy, this man, he's not human.
Oh. You know what? That's what we needed. We needed Dr. Loomis on the case.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. He gets kind of unhinged in the later Halloween movie, so...
Like... Also, I have to apologize for this joke, but at one point, the leprechaun grabs Nathan's hot dog.
Oh, God.
That's right. There was a fight scene when the cabinet's in the kitchen.
That's fucking harassment, Lupton. What the hell?
I have to apologize, but I also had to make that joke. Like, come on. It was right there.
Nope, you're fine. You're fine.
I mean, once they establish, like, oh, this is an R-rated series, then they start going into more mature jokes. Or mature jokes, let's call it that.
How about the lady in Leprechaun 3 that gets, like, everything about her inflated and she explodes?
I want to talk about Leprechaun 3 later on, yes. Jasmine's eyes are just like, your reaction's golden.
What the fuck?
Honestly, watching all of this, all the fun and games with, like, the leprechaun popping out of the cabinets and stuff, I'm like, you know what? This would actually be pretty fun as a Horror Nights house. Like, the set would not be hard to build, and just having a dude in a leprechaun mask popping out, that would be a good time.
That's when this movie really shines.
Yeah.
Is that when...
Just when it's a goofy haunted house movie.
Yes, when he's like leprechauning it up. Like there's a scene where like he pops out of a truck engine with like carburetor in his teeth, and it's like, well, again, now you're an animal again. You're like, you're not a leprechaun now.
We got one of those engine leprechauns.
He's stealing it from Gremlins. But then he goes into the warehouse and he comes out with a little go-kart and like knocks over the truck. That's fun.
Where did that come from?
Leprechaun did it.
Where did the Deathmobile come from? And like, okay, so he's able to roll this truck with this little vehicle, but then his hand comes off in a door? What? How?
He's magic, Chandler. He's magic.
But he can't get through a wooden door?
Why would his magic make him weak suddenly? That doesn't make any sense.
Because he doesn't have all of his gold. We established this.
That is true.
You say this movie's got no rules. It's got all the rules.
But he survived crashing into that ramming speed.
Listen, Chandler, it works the way the movie needs it to work.
It works because it works because of the writing.
It just works.
So we see him with a little skateboard, doing the little trickaroos down the hall, doing poses.
And I gotta say, like, around this time when Tori was still saying it's not a fucking leprechaun, basically, I was just like,
how?
Like, at this point, what else would it be? Number one. And number two, you know, Edgar Wright ended up doing this way better in Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah.
Any zombies out there? Don't say that. What? That? What? That? The Z word. Don't say it. Why not? Because it's ridiculous.
I also wrote down, like, the whole line where she's like, I'm sick of your fantasies, Ozzy. It's like, you are being chased by a fucking leprechaun. What are you talking about, fantasies?
Denial ain't just
Get with the
Tori.
program, Tori. It's like in Leprechaun 2. Step it up, Bridget.
So
I have much to look forward to, I see.
Yes. Yeah. He also shows up with a little wheelchair, like you said, all the forms of transportation.
You take a shot every time the leprechaun uses a new form of transportation, you would be dead. The only thing he doesn't have to ride around in this movie is a little train, but I'm pretty sure he does that in a later movie.
Oh, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Like this, like we're talking about all the fun things that Warwick Davis is doing because he really is like the shining clover of this film series, and this one in particular. When he's on screen, it's normally like the best time you're going to have because he's having the best time.
Warwick Davis is a great actor, and he clearly loves what he's doing.
Exactly.
It's fun hamming it up in a bad horror movie.
What actor doesn't want to play a villain?
Exactly.
Yeah, very true.
So Tori learns that you need a 4-leaf clover, and they eventually find one in the patch. Then the leprechaun's chasing Ozzy because, that's the last gold that he's getting. And then in comes our famous line at the end, "Fuck you, Lucky Charms."
Which is so ridiculous, yet it's so good.
It's right up there with "Smile, You Son of a Bitch" and "This is the End, Friend" as like one of the best like horror movie one-liners.
I would also say "Not in My Movie" belongs there somewhere.
"Not in My Movie" and "Welcome to My World."
This also beats Rosebud. Move over, Citizen Kane.
Oh my god, yeah.
You heard it here first, folks. Smith says that Leprechaun is better than Citizen Kane.
I'm sorry, I've never seen Citizen Kane, but I've seen Leprechaun dozens of times.
In one specific context and nothing else.
I will say, iterations of Citizen Kane are also eligible for this podcast as of last year.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So something to keep in mind.
All right. I may have to, first time you sing Leprechaun, first time you sing Citizen Kane. There we go.
Excellent. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to that episode. So I will say the death scene of the Leprechaun is actually legitimately really good. Like that makeup effect, how he melts slowly.
Oh, it's so good.
And like half his face is melting. You see his weird jaw.
Yeah, no,
like it's
it
so
is well
good.
done. I did scream, I'm melting. And honestly, they should have just leaned into it. Just do it.
Is that why you're wearing the Wicked shirt?
I mean, it's because it's green, but it does help.
Okay.
I apparently have like no green shirts. So I'm like, okay, I went with kind of orangish gold. I don't know.
There you go.
Chandler, I'm colorblind, so it looks pretty all right to me.
It's an audio podcast.
Exactly. Y'all can't see this.
Chandler, your green shirt looks amazing. I wish the audience was able to see it.
Thank you. Well, I have green balloons behind me, so I did that.
Yes, you decorated for this, which is very charming. I love that.
There's literally a bit in Leprechaun in the Hood where they do like a Scooby-Doo bit where like it pans across them and then like the leprechaun's like, I hope he didn't find us, and everyone's like, ah! It's great. It's so good.
Okay, that
it's
does
so
sound
funny.
like a lot of fun. I am a sucker for a Scooby-Doo
They had
bit.
some fun with that one, as much as they had like even less resources to do like Lep in the Hood. Like it actually has like really good characters, which is really rare to see in like a late sequel slasher.
So I guess like we are at the end now of the first movie. Chandler, you want to share our thoughts with the sequels you supposedly hate?
I didn't say I hated them. I said they're just, they had even less of a budget as they went along. The second one is just the same shit been in LA, basically.
And also it's kind of a rom-com.
Yeah, rom-com. And then the third one is in Vegas, which is fun. It still has, obviously, problems, because they're just plagued by having no budget. But that one was fun. And then they get Leprechaun 4 in space, and it's like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? And then they do the 2 In the Hood movies, which are actually like surprisingly good for, again, just the fact that they had no budget to work with for either of these.
Interesting.
Leprechaun 5 In the Hood. That's the one that has that Lep in the Hood come to do no good rap. And it's so bad.
Oh, God.
So
yeah.
I will say, Jasmine, so you watched this first one.
Mm-hmm.
Are you willing to watch the sequels?
I am willing. Okay. For the bit. Because especially since you guys seem to make it seem like it gets a little more fun, which is good. Because for me, this was like a movie of all bits, and none of them particularly good for me.
It takes so long for all of the characters to figure out what is happening in this movie that it's just a bunch of scenes. It's them at the diner arguing about meatloaf. It's like, what are we doing here? There's no reason why the killer needs to remain secret to most of the characters in this.
When are we going to get to the Leprechaun factory?
Yes. Well, that would be Silver Shamrock.
Oh, no.
With the sequels, you have 2 and 3 that to me are like the epitome of like the best idea of what you can have, where it's like, okay, we have an evil leprechaun. What are we going to do with them, and how are we going to do with it, and where are we going to do it with him? Mm-hmm. The second one is it's the only one in the series that takes place on St. Patrick's Day. Mm-hmm. So there's that.
Really?
It takes place
the only one that takes place on St. Patrick's Day?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Wow, that's wild.
And it takes place in LA, and all the characters that are surrounding it, like there's a consistent theme of greed, because the central characters are like charlatans. They do these really bad like tour guides of Hollywood. Like if you're a tourist in anywhere really, you would be a sucker for these guys, and it would like you would have a bad time. That's our central characters, and the Leprechaun preys on that. Like there is a consistent through line of a character. They trap the Leprechaun, but his greed is his downfall, and he gets away in a pretty like sad, grotesque way, but very gleeful because it's Warwick Davis. And then the third one we mentioned, it's in Vegas, and it's like, okay, evil Leprechaun, where are we going to put him? Vegas, baby.
Vegas.
That's
obviously.
That makes
perfect.
sense.
He sees an Elvis impersonator. He does his own Elvis impersonation. He gives magic powers to a really bad magician, and then it backfires.
Leprechaun 3 is way better than Jason Takes Manhattan at fulfilling the premise of this character in this location.
Fair.
Exactly. Now 4 is your litmus test. It is your like, okay, if I'm on board with 2 and 3, I might be on board with 4 if I'm okay with it being an Alien knockoff, and also strangely a Lost in Space knockoff. But,
oh my god, that means it kind of works doubly for us, because Lost in Space is based off of Swiss Family Robinson.
Now, it is the only time where Warwick Davis has a lightsaber, so
You know, I can rock with that. I
Okay.
can rock with that.
I forgot about that.
yes, it's not good. We can all admit it's not
Doesn't
good.
doesn't he also pop out of a guy's junk at one point?
He does, and then he makes a prophylactic joke. It's great.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Oh man.
But the rhyming starts to get a little worse now. 5, Chandler, I know you love 5. I don't. It follows a trend as the first.
It's got a lot of problems. But I think the characters are really good.
My central problem with 5 is that it bleeds white suburban creative team with no input from anyone else. And if your movie is a Leprechaun in the hood,
totally valid. Yeah,
super problematic
you absolutely
and
feel
not.
that.
Yeah,
like your main character is post-match.
And there's another problematic element of that movie as well.
Oh god, please tell me no one does blackface.
No.
Oh, thank god.
There's a trans character, and this is early 2000s.
There's a trans character, and it was not handled well.
Oh no.
But
not handled well.
Back to the Hood, though, it does try to do again what number 2 did, where it was like, okay, let's actually try and do a concept of themes, and there actually does feel like there were some Black people that actually were somewhat involved with the creative process.
I am fascinated, and yeah, I will leave the sequels up for possible future St. Patrick's Day episodes, because
that would be fun. That would be fun.
That would be
this an
fun.
annual tradition.
This would be entertaining. I'm trying to get other people to watch Leprechaun with me. I'm running out.
oh no.
And as we discussed before, we don't talk about the Hornswoggle nonsense. That didn't happen. That has nothing to do with anything.
We may have to in 7 years.
Well, yes,
if this podcast lasts for 7 years, I'll be so happy.
But then Leprechaun Returns, like I said, that one's kind of very much the requel style. And honestly, it works really well because it does come back to the same location and has some of the characters return, which is really cool. I really like that. I think that's a lot of fun, especially in a franchise where every movie, the rules and characters are different and they don't really have any recurring characters. Being able to actually do that is really fun.
This has been really fun, going down memory lane of one of my childhood favorite movies.
Aww,
absolutely. This is a fun time.
I'm very glad. But yeah, with that said, so why is it that the story of the Leprechaun endures? So much so that we get, again, an 8-movie horror franchise out of them.
Honestly, I don't know so much about the Leprechaun legend. It's more so to me just Warwick Davis being just a fun, energetic energy to these movies. Mm-hmm. I mean, Leprechaun, in terms of like a horror movie monster, it's a little guy in makeup, which is kind of cheap and easy, and you just happen to, pun intended, strike gold with an actor who wants to do this.
Fair enough.
I think the other thing is, at the end of the day, all of the movies end up coming down to people being greedy and getting their shit wrecked because they were greedy.
Which is fair, and it almost kind of ties into why the legend endures. I mean, who doesn't dream of coming upon a whole lot of money at random? And, well, I mean, there's the perils and the promise of trying to make a deal with this fey creature in order to obtain that money. There's a lot of compelling stories you could do with that. I almost wish they had done a little more with that here, to be honest. Like,
yeah, with that theme.
A Leprechaun horror movie in, like, the modern day, in this current economic situation, I think you could do some really interesting and nuanced things with it, while also still doing silly bits.
Oh, you might like number 2 then, because we have a yuppie character in one scene who's like a throwaway kill scene.
Because when you think about it, by all accounts, you could easily make the Leprechaun a sympathetic antagonist when you think about it, because it's just like, I mean, yeah, you did kind of steal his money there, dudes.
Mm-hmm.
But also, again, if you go with the whole idea of, you know, greed and poverty and stuff like that, you could also make our leads, our human characters, sympathetic as well. So that could be really nuanced and interesting.
When they do kind of play with those themes in like in the Hood movies, they do kind of explore those themes a little bit. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's not as good as it could be, especially with like, you know, like you said, the first in the Hood movie where it's like it's very obviously a white creative team who kind of doesn't really know much about any of this, but they still tried.
It's so funny we're talking about this now, because just yesterday we talked about that exact same problem with The Princess and the Frog, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You just had me like talking about like a Leprechaun movie in modern times. Just the idea of like someone tricks a leprechaun to buying an NFT and he's like, "Where's me gold?" It's like, here's a code of a picture.
Oh,
I need that yesterday. I need that yesterday.
That would be the audience-pleasing death.
Because in the new one, it's kind of just the sorority like buys the house to fix it up.
Yeah, the recent one is a very big throwback.
There's a drone kill. There's a solar panel kill, but like none of the kills really like, or I should say the story doesn't get a huge update other than just these characters are in the modern era.
And listen, I get it. Not all horror movies have to be social horror, but I just think that'd be neat.
Right.
Warwick Davis was the person who kept this film series alive, and he wanted to do like a movie set in the Wild West at one point, but he never got a chance to do that. Like basically, he just wanted to do. Yeah, he loved playing this character. But the new guy who played the most recent one, he's a lot of fun.
Okay, good.
So there's a lot of steam you can have with a killer Leprechaun movie. Mm-hmm. Like you can keep up this theme of whimsical characters, but are also like kind of, you know, killery that doesn't need to be Winnie the Pooh.
Or like, again, like you need to have some heart in it. Like,
I think the problem with Winnie the Pooh, at least with the first one, the second one has a little bit more humanity to it, but like the first one, it's like it's so joyless. Mm-hmm. And like I think if you're gonna do something as silly as a killer leprechaun, it needs to be fun.
Absolutely. Like, and the thing is, like, I don't object to a horror movie version of anything. You just need to actually put some thought and creativity and make it feel like you wanted to do it because you wanted to do it, not just for the cash grab reasons.
Not just because, oh, this character is public domain, so I can make a garbage horror movie that's just a cheap ripoff of Friday the 13th in a couple months.
Yeah.
At an arcade. Freaking Mickey's Mousetrap.
God. But yeah, beyond this 8-movie horror franchise, leprechauns do in fact endure. You see leprechauns everywhere during St. Patrick's Day, after all.
I think there's just a type of whimsicalness to it. Like, even in this movie, there was a reference of like Santa Claus, and Santa Claus was like, he's a symbol of a certain idea. Yeah. And with leprechauns, it's like, we know like they're not representative of real Irish people. Yeah. So there's a type of a fun whimsy to it versus like, this is why you can name like your football team after them, like as a leprechaun versus, you know, a Native American or something. There's no tether to it. Like we have the connection to a culture, a group of people, but we're not representing them in that way. So it's a way of like a safe cultural appropriation.
Sure.
Like look at the Irish.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing is people just like novelty holiday horror movies. And no one else has really done a St. Patrick's Day horror movie. It's just the Leprechaun series, at least to my knowledge. That's all you really need. when
True.
you kind of cornered the market on a holiday for horror movie representation, people are always going to want to have a horror movie for a holiday.
Yeah, it's fun. I've actually heard good things about that Uncle Sam horror movie.
Oh, yeah. That one's actually good.
And it's actually about something.
The killer is a Gulf War not veteran. He's super dead, but like undead, and he comes back to comes back to a small town and kills off just different aspects of people who celebrate or not celebrate 4th of July. So like corrupt politicians, flag burning teenagers, everyone. It's like a big cathartic. It's the same guy, I think, who did Maniac Cop. So there's social commentary in there.
Sense, yeah.
And then you have Thanksgiving.
Oh, God.
Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving 3.
Gravy.
Gravy. Oh my God. Oh man.
So this has been fun.
Yep.
This has been great, guys. I'm very happy to come on here. My first time talking about Leprechaun.
For sure.
For what it's worth, nothing that the Leprechaun has ever said is as bad as the first line in Thanksgiving, which is "nice tits, bitch," and that's the first line.
Oof.
Yeah,
that hurts me.
Yeah.
Final thoughts and or pluggables.
So give this movie series a chance. If the first one is not to your liking, but you like the idea of a killer leprechaun, give 2 and 3 a chance, because they do a lot better with the idea and the setting. As for pluggables, I'm CB Smith. I run a YouTube channel with that name. My flagship series is Taking a Page, talking about books, adaptations, and the history behind them, along with little mini short essays just revolving around books and the history behind certain aspects of them. Mm-hmm. And that's all I got.
You can find me on Sunnyland Productions on YouTube. I do videos about a lot of different animated shows, and I want to do stuff about theme parks, but it's kind of hard to break out of that niche once YouTube is like, you're doing this specific thing, this is what we're going to recommend to people. But I do a lot talking about representation in media, cultural representation, LGBTQ representation. I did a big video about autism last year, autism and ADHD. I want to do more stuff like that coming soon. One of those is going to be about the new-ish series Primos, which I really like. But at this point, I'm going to wait until the rest of the first season has come out so I can talk about just all of it. And as of us recording this, tomorrow, which is my birthday, I should have a video talking about Phineas and Ferb birthday episodes. So,
ooh, fun.
Happy birthday, Chandler.
Yes. Happy birthday and happy Mardi Gras.
Yes, my birthday is on March 4th, which is Mardi Gras, so that's going to be super fun. Speaking of holidays, I don't know if there's a Mardi Gras horror movie outside of like Hatchet.
We'll have to look into it.
Yeah, I don't know.
And also you and Shammy should talk more, because you kind of have similar priorities in terms of your creations. And this episode's hero's call to action is for a GoFundMe for Deontay's journey to mobility freedom. He is currently 67% of the way through his GoFundMe to raise money to get a wheelchair accessible van. If you are able to, please consider donating. And additionally, you can find me at Faye Rivera on basically all the socials. You can also follow this podcast on both Twitter and Blue Sky at IER Podcast. And if you'd like to help us reach the next chapter of our story, please consider donating to our Patreon, Ko-Fi, or the Support the Show link below. Or if you are only able to support us through word of mouth, through giving us a rating or giving us a review, those are still essential to keeping this podcast going. And speaking of, next week, well, I hear tell that Disney's doing their live-action remake stuff again. So I think it's time we go back. Back to before this company was the juggernaut that it is, long before they even knew if they could regularly make feature-length films. That's right, my friends. We are going to be covering Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. We hope you will join us. And remember, stories gain power in nature telling. And have a very happy St. Patrick's Day.
Is that a leprechaun behind you too? Wow, you're really dedicated to the bit there, Chandler.
Ah, fuck!
I want to be gold.
Oh, god damn it. As if we didn't have enough mythical creatures to fight. Medusa, Orlok, I need your help. We got a leprechaun to fight now. Come here, short stack. Fuck you, Lucky Charms. Try as you may, try as you might. Who threatens my friends will make it to the night. How do you like that?